because it's a very, very special guest. It's one of my personal idols. When I started to learn about business and strategy, so I'll do a very short introduction with about Rita because it could take me the whole hour if I just talk about her achievements. I think everybody knows Rita, what she has achieved in the space of strategy, and she's a professor in Columbia Business Schools. She has a popular program around leading strategic growth and change. She has been named one of the, or received the #1 achievement award for strategy from Thinkers 50. Well, she has so many awards, so many achievements. She has published amazing books. I love the one that she published some years ago, The End of Competitive Advantage. I think that was a game changer if you think about strategy. Her latest book, Seeing Around Corners, it's also amazing, just published a few months ago, and I'll ask Rita if you can share a bit about that book and your latest research. Maybe just a small anecdote about Rita. Well, she's brilliant. She's one of the most, the smartest woman in strategy in history, but she's so generous and so human. It's just very nice and a pleasure to have you with us, Rita. But the anecdote I wanted to share is when I started to work in the area of thought leadership and publications, and a professor in London, Julian Bikram, he told me, if you want to be recognized as an expert in the management world, you need to publish 3 articles in Harvard Business Review or Post. If you want to be a guru, you need to publish 10. Rita has published 59 according to my latest research. So I think that says everything about Rita, and thank you so much for being here. I know you are so busy, but everybody around this group is so excited to have you for a few minutes. If you can share a bit your views about your book, but also your views about the future. And then just answer a few questions. I think you will make the day of everybody here tonight and today. Thank you, Rita. Welcome to our group, and I leave you the floor. Any questions, just put them in the chat, please. Welcome, Rita. Let me give you the, I'm trying to unmute you.
I think I'm unmuted.
Now you are, yes.
Okay, wonderful. So there's a short presentation I can give if
you're sure, yes.
Or we can just make it informal and we can just have an open discussion. It's really whatever you want.
No, short presentation would be great.
Okay, so let me share my screen. So as Antonio said, my most recent book is called Seeing Around Corners, and it has to do with strategic inflection points. And we're right in the middle of one now, so it's sort of taken over our lives. And I thought I'd just share some ideas about where we might be heading with respect to inflection points, if I can get my computer to do what it's supposed to do. So let's understand first what an inflection point is, how I define it. And I'm going to keep this really short. So an inflection point is a turning point when external forces, typically outside your control, change the nature of the operations of your business. And as you know, any business has a set of assumptions that are baked into its operations. And since you're largely project management people, you'll be very well versed in this. And so you develop key performance indicators, you develop leading indicators, you develop metrics about how the business works based on what was true at the time those metrics were invented. And over time, what happens is, as things change in the external environment, the metrics stop holding tightly to reality. So just as a really simple example, if you think about YouTube, if you think about Google, if you think about these like revolutionary technologies that have come out into the world, when YouTube was first created, and I think it was launched in 2008, another recessionary time, nobody took it seriously. Nobody said to themselves, oh my God, the invention of this technology is going to completely change the world of media, and it'll completely destroy existing assumptions about, what we thought about communications. Because, before YouTube, you had to be Metro Goldwyn Mayer or the News Corp or something if you wanted to get a video message to 1 million people. But nobody took it seriously at the beginning. Why? Because in its early stages, these things have very weak signals, and we don't see where they're going to take us. So what was YouTube? It was cat videos, right? A lot of YouTube still is cat videos. And so we don't take it seriously in the beginning. But what happens over time as the inflection point moves through is people, entrepreneurs, start to discover these new possibilities. And that's where a lot of the innovation begins to happen. But it doesn't happen all at once. It happens, slowly, and then it reaches a breaking point. And if you're prepared, it can take your organization to new heights. And if you're not, it can cause severe damage. So that's the nature of an inflection point. So when we think about the signals that we pay attention to as we're navigating through an inflection point, and I think this is very relevant to the project community, we've got 3 kinds of indicators we could be looking at. So the first kind is what I call lagging indicators. And most of the data that we use to make decisions in business does indeed lag. It lags the actual phenomena. So most financial numbers, for example, they're great information about something that's already passed. Then you have current indicators, and you can think of current indicators sort of like your employee engagement or net promoter scores. They sort of tell you where you are right now. And the hardest indicators to get hold of are the leading indicators, the things that tell you where you're going to be. And so I think part of the whole inflection point theme is really how do we develop some of these indicators that would tell us where we're going to be headed. So I'm not going to go into this, but what I thought would be kind of helpful is thinking about our current situation and what might be the scenarios we want to be preparing for. That's mostly what people are interested in now. So I'm going to pick, this is a little methodology, I have it in my recent book. So pick any 2 major uncertainties, juxtapose different future states of them against each other, and that gives you a 2x2, really simple 2x2. And then tell a story about that future, and then craft a headline about what the future might be. So the 2 uncertainties I picked just for the sake of provoking discussion are, we've had for about, I guess since the 80s, this regime in profit-making businesses that shareholders come first and everybody else is way behind. And that's resulted in a lot of social inequality. It's reduced the power of labor unions. It's increased the incentives of executives to do things like buybacks and. And so we've had a kind of an unraveling of the post-World War II consensus about what a fair capitalist economy was like. So either that continues, or this crisis has the effect of really altering how people feel about that form of capitalism. And the other uncertainty that, of course, is on everyone's mind is perhaps the economy comes back, fairly soon, or it goes into a long and protracted slump, all over the world. So those are the 2 I'm going to pick. And what that gives you is this little 2x2 with 4 different potential scenarios. So we'll start the first one, which I think is the most sad one, which is we continue to want to maximize shareholder value more than anything else, and we have a prolonged global slowdown. And I think that's a very precarious future. I call it Les Miserables. Poverty becomes much more pervasive. People that were able to be brought out of poverty in the last 20, 30 years find that they're suddenly shoved back. The middle class continues to erode. And all of that, I think, will contribute to substantial political instability. So that's not so great. But let's say we continue to maximize shareholder value and the economy kind of comes back, maybe not back to where it was, but it starts to recover in a substantive way. And essentially that's what we've got sort of before the crisis hit, right? It's sort of rinse and repeat of the last few years. In the other condition, where we've got more of a stakeholder capitalism and we have a prolonged global slowdown, what I suggest that scenario looks like is we'll have a pretty massive expansion of global safety net programs. For example, here in the US, we'll realize that there's a cost to everyone of not having a basic level of public health that has to be met. You may see things like taxation of wealth that's already been earned and is stocked away in offshore accounts and that kind of thing. And you'll start to see a sense that the greater good outweighs the privileges of a few. More of that sense of we're all in this together that you had after the Second World War. And if things kind of bounce back, what I think we may see in that scenario, the last scenario, is much more of a return to the post-war consensus on the distribution of wealth, gradually reducing wealth inequality, social goods such as healthcare, education, and so on being made much more affordable. So the next step of the process is you design a headline. And for this particular exercise, I thought it was kind of interesting. I was able to find a headline that to me captures the essence of each of these future states. So the first one, the headline would be Why Economic Inequality Leads to Collapse. And I actually found that headline. In the second state, we've got Extreme Poverty Returns to America. I found that headline. The third headline in the upper right box is an echo of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Rendezvous with Destiny speech, in which he basically said, and this was coming out of the Depression, that to have the means of production owned by a few large and powerful entities and individuals was economic tyranny. And he laid out his plan for experimenting their way out of it, much to the chagrin of other members of his social class. And the last case, I'm calling that the Great Society 2.0. The reason I'm calling it that is, if we have the resources and there's this real shift in sensibility about what a fair and just system should be, and we have the policies behind it, we could start to be thinking about how that might shift. So those are some thoughts. Let me just see if there's anything else here. Oh, a couple of last sort of ideas to have you think about. And this is something Antonio knows I've been working on quite a bit. When I started in the field of strategy was like over there, and it was all people doing industry analysis and order of entry calculations and R&D intensity and stuff like that, but it was all at the industry level of analysis for the most part. And innovation, which was my field, was kind of over there. And those of us studying innovation, very unpopularly, we were looking inside companies, we were looking at individual managers and individual decisions. And what's happened, I think, as this phenomenon that I call the transient advantage economy, or the narrowing of windows of competitive advantage, have really swept through economies all over the world. People can't avoid innovation anymore. It used to be possible to become a senior leader and never encounter innovation ever in your life, because you could just be an operating person, and the innovators, you needed one once every 15 or 20 years, but then you were kind of good to go. So strategy and innovation, I think, have really come together in a very interesting way. And the last is that digital has now started to be infused with the innovation agenda, to the point that I don't think we can really talk about innovation intelligently without some aspect of digital coming into it. So I'd say that if you want to reach me, these are my contact information, and Antonio can put you in touch with me. And let's go back to our conversation.
Thank you, Rita. Always inspiring. I love the matrix.
Oh, thank you.
You come always with these simplified methods and matrix, and everything kind of makes sense on the four quadrants. I think when you were explaining the bottom right, everybody was saying, yeah, that's
Wouldn't that be great?
One. Yeah.
Well, my own prediction, and I'm not a big, as you know, I'm not big on prediction because I think it's just impossible. There's too many variables in the world. But where I suspect a lot of the world is going to go is the top two, and then it's kind of up to us. Do we want a more just society with constrained resources? So that's going to be difficult, right? I think probably the top right one. So the economy is going to take a while to become, a return to growth is going to take a while. And I do think the seeds are there for a new social contract, but we'll have to see if the policy will exist to try to make that happen.
That's the key question. How do you influence the policymakers?
Mhm.
That's the right quadrant. That's for me the biggest challenge.
Mhm.
Yeah, I want to open a bit the floor for questions from uh, the audience. So just type it here. In the meantime, Rita, what if you're a leader? You have your small company.
Mhm.
How should you react? Well, how do you think about your strategy? Is there something you've already thought, or
Mhm.
what should these people do that have 10 employees or 100
Mhm.
employees? What can they do?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do once you get over the initial shock, I think the first thing you need to do is really take some time and take stock. So, how much cash have I got? How long can I make it without any revenue coming in? What's my position going to be relative to my people? Are these skilled, talented people that I want with me once we pass through this? And depending on that decision, let's then really look at the capabilities we have. So I've been collecting some very interesting stories of small businesses that have pivoted, and let me illustrate with three. So one was a story that was told by Vern Harnish at the recent event that was put on by Kai-Han Krippendorf.
Mhm.
And he tells the story of an entrepreneur acquaintance of his whose business is making high-end shutters, beautifully crafted, very expensive shutters that go on people's homes, famous people's homes, very rich people's homes. And of course, nobody's buying shutters at this point. Nobody wants workmen in their place. So he's basically looking from day 1 to day 30 of a particular month, sales going from normal to zero, right? And he was frantic. He had 60 people. He didn't want to put them suddenly out of work. It would have meant the end of his business. And so what he did was he really looked at what were they capable of doing in that organization. And what he realized was that the capabilities they used to make these beautiful bespoke shutters were actually quite suitable to the manufacture of certain kinds of hospital equipment that were necessary to get people moved around safely and put on ventilators and so forth. And so he overnight twisted his production into the manufacture of these things, and sent out very simple marketing messages to all of his network in the hospitals. Each hospital passed it on to their network, and today he's now got over 250 people on staff. So this is within the last 6 weeks. And they're just going 24/7 making these very necessary supplies that nobody realized were going to be in shortness. So I think you have to really look at your skill set. What are you able to do? So second story comes from my colleague Ryan McManus, who's on the board of a company called Nortel. It's a publicly traded company board. And he was just casually talking to someone in his network about the ventilator shortage. And the person said to him, it's not a shortage of the pipes and all that stuff. We can 3D print that stuff very easily. The ventilator shortage is a shortage of circuit boards.
Mhm.
And Ryan went, what? Nortel makes circuit boards. Now, it's always made them for the telecommunications industry. That's been its primary customer. But he went to his other board members and he said, hey, did you know that the ventilator problem is actually a circuit board problem? And they all said, no, they didn't know. So then he reached out to a couple of potential clients, General Electric, which makes the ventilators, being one of them. And today, this is 1 week later, they're now massively in the ventilator business, and adding that extra capacity has now increased the ability of hospitals to get this critical component. And so brand new arena, brand new customer base, brand new kind of sales channel, but the company's embraced it with enthusiasm. So I think stop and take stock, figure out what you're going to do about your people. And then the third thing is, are there places today where those capabilities that have been built up and honed over time might have a value and might have some economic benefit?
Nice. And this work for any kind of company, small one, medium, large.
Mhm.
These steps are brilliant. Let me move to, there was a question from Marcello. You want to, Marcello, unmute you and do the question to Rita, please be
Yes,
brief.
because it was maybe a complex question. Hi, Rita, and thank you so much, and great from Austria. The question was, when you were describing the 2.2 matrix and these different models that we may decide to be as a society, I was thinking how difficult is these days to think about who we want to be as a society, because we're so busy finding solutions, the urgent solution to the crisis and the current model. And this is a struggle because somehow we don't seem to allow ourselves this reflection point. Who do we want to be before what do we want to do? And I was curious to know your perspective on this.
So I think everybody's going to come through this, in different phases. So certainly here in America, the initial phase was just denial. We're not going to have a problem. It's all under control. It's all taken care of. This was like February, right? And here we are in April, and now, of course, it's a full-blown crisis. I live in New Jersey, and here in New Jersey, it's a law now. If you're not allowed to go out of your house without a face mask on. So if face masks were in scarce supply before, it's impossible to get them. I finally had a friend sewed one for me and brought it over. So that's the only way I've been able to even leave house. So I think the first phase is really denial. And the second phase is kind of, what are we going to do about this, and sort of mourning what we've lost and being really upset. And as we know, you kind of go to anger, right, next, and then eventually we go to problem solving and solutions. And I think once we're at that point where we can sort of see more than 6 feet in front of us and take a big step back, that's when I think you'll see people being willing to reflect more. I'm sure this is true for all of you. My world right now is just a dense thicket of communication. Like everybody wants to do virtual calls, virtual, because right now we're still in that phase where we're trying to figure out what this even is. We don't know that yet. And there's no certainty whatsoever about how we're going to come through it. So I think, one thing, once you're at a stage where you can kind of take a breath and where every minute of your calendar is not just full of stuff that's urgent, right? I think it's very wise to just take some time, come back and reflect. And Antonio, one thing your group might be able to do is just make a commitment to take an hour, not more than that, an hour, because we're all really busy, and sleep and exercise and things are priorities too. But take an hour, do some of that reflection, and perhaps contribute that thinking to some kind of common document or idea, because I think this group is really uniquely positioned to give some good input into what kind of structure, how do we want society to look. So, I've been hearing everything from, we're going to go right back to lifetime jobs with one employer, because what people want now is not gig economy jobs where everybody's just jumping around. We want security. We want to be, we want that loyalty in exchange for security bargain that there used to be with companies, right? All the way over to the other extreme that said, no, it's all going to be project staffed. It's all going to be gig workers. Nobody's going to want a permanent workforce anymore because, they want to be able to flex and, go. And I've heard the entire range of extremes in terms of people's points of view. So I think it's useful to have that breadth right now, because in the early stages of an inflection point, and Andy Grove taught us this many, many years ago, he said, in the early stages, what you want is as much divergence as you can get. And so one of the reasons I'm kind of busy is I'm tapping into as many calls as I can humanly fit into, because I think we need that. I think we need that, what's here, what's next, what are smart people from all around the world really thinking. And I think that could be a fun thing for you guys to do as a community. It might be kind of interesting. And you have enormous influence. You have enormous influence. So, if you're taking that time, that can spread.
We can spread that around. We'll take the action, Rita. Thank you. Yes. We tend to be very hands-on and not stepping back. So
well, and if you'd like to include me in that, do that, because I'm as guilty as anybody else. My husband can tell you so here's my video set up, right, and then my desk set up is over there, and I spend my day going back and forth from one to the other.
How is John? How is he doing?
He's frustrated by the fact that his hair now looks kind of like one of those 1980s rock musicians. John's my husband, for those of you that don't know. And I actually forayed out with my brand new mask today to acquire razors, because he was not only looking like a 1980s rock musician, his face was starting to look kind of mountain man, So I classed that as an emergency supply.
Thank you. I love John.
He says hello, by the way.
Just a couple of more questions. Graham, you want to share your question with Rita?
Oh, who me?
Yeah, Graham. Yeah, you put the question there.
Okay, yeah. Hi, Rita.
Hi.
I'll just turn on my video here so you can see me.
Oh,
A
hello.
great, yeah, great presentation. I saw a clip as well, I think on LinkedIn, of you doing some of that strategy thinking
Mhm,
on one of your presentations where you had the quadrant and
mhm.
coming up with the seeing around corners. So what I was going to ask was, do you think that that kind of work is applicable to governments? Because to me, I see bureaucracies right now trying to scramble and deal with this emergency by printing a bunch of money. And it may lead us to some major issues. So do you think that your method there is applicable to more than just, say, for example, businesses? Can it be applied
Oh,
to
absolutely.
the political systems and things too?
Right. And I think, you should do it if you're really making complex decisions based on that kind of scenario view. I think you want to do it for several different kinds of uncertainty. And a really good person to reference on that is the work of Amy Webb. She has an institute, I think it's called the Future Today Institute, and they have all these downloadable resources. She also has a big book that she does every year. She gives it away for free on future trends. So I think for government, what people have forgotten about government, and they've vilified government, and it deeply bothers me because government markets cannot solve all problems. There are things that are known as public goods, and there's the tragedy of the commons, and government has a very important role to do. It has to set the rules for capitalist enterprise. So if I was in government right now, I'd really want to be thinking about, what are the policy prescriptions? What are the places I can make an impact? And that can be very local. Our township is doing a whole bunch of quite interesting things that are really just within the purview of our township, all the way up to our national and federal leaders. So I think you can certainly use the same framework. You'd probably use different uncertainties. I mean, one of the things I am concerned about is, as your ratio of debt to GDP gets out of whack, very strange things start to happen in your economy. And we've had a very low return to capital on as long as my children in their adult life can remember. That's not necessarily going to be the case forever. I mean, I am old enough to remember the 70s when the bank index rate for interest was something like 17%. I mean, it was very expensive back then. So we'll have to start to see. Debtors love inflation. Savers don't like inflation. So, one of the policy choices that's going to have to be thought about very carefully is, do we inflate our way out of our obligations and decimate those who've been careful with their capital? Or, how do we balance those interests? It's going to be a very interesting question.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks, Rita.
Sure.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Graham. Teresa Durham, you want to answer, ask the question to Rita? Where are you, Teresa, as well, if you can tell us?
Hello, everyone. I am in Snellville, Georgia. It's a suburb of Atlanta. And actually, Rita answered my question when she answered the first question.
Oh,
so if you want to move on to someone else, I'm good. That was very helpful. I'm finding this very insightful and helpful. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, I'm delighted.
Thank you, Teresa. Fernando, I have three more questions, and then Fernando, if you can quickly share your question. You're in Madrid? Fernando.
Yes, hi. I am still in Madrid, yes. Live and in Madrid. It's not easy. So, Rita, I think that we will recover, of course. It will be a question that the past was to pass a hard summer. But I think that after the summer, that the idea that at least that we have here in Europe after the missing of supplying of many things that they come from China. You cannot imagine how many flights from China arrived in Madrid airports in the last week. So I think that they only landed 3 flights from China. I mean, I'm far west. So I think that for the new recovery of the Europe, at least in Europe, I'm thinking in Europe, that will be more domestic market, right? Because as soon as appear that we miss something, breathing items appear in one car company, that the same machine that appear in Madrid, We blocked it 2 weeks ago. A flight was blocked in Turkey with 150 people for items to breathe. We discovered that we made 300 per day in this factory. So the imagination blew up, and I think that there will be more domestic market than international ones. I think that of course will be plenty of opportunity to find a job or to find a new business, but more in a domestic market instead as international market.
Yeah, and there's a real debate about that, right? So I think one thing we have learned to our regret is that we have not priced resilience into our supply chains. I mean, I think that's fairly clear. And if you want to build a resilient system, and you all know this more than I do, you need redundancies, you need slack, you need to pre-plan supplies, pre-plant resources, even if you don't know where they're going to be called on. You need replicable resources, and you need to be able to shut down parts of a system so it doesn't affect everything else. So it's a real project management kind of mindset you need to bring to it. But we haven't priced that in. And this is another example when I talk about, markets can't solve all problems, because that's a market failure, right? That negotiating on price without accounting for the externalities is a market failure. So there are two camps on the local versus continuing global question. So one camp is this one, which basically says make everything domestically, even if it's a little more expensive. Be very careful about what you outsource, and a resurgence of regional development, right? So that's kind of one pole. The other pole that I hear is actually know that the 800 or say 1 billion people who live in the industrialized world and have enjoyed the fruits of global trade for the last however many years, 40 years, they're not going to dictate to the 6 or 7 billion other people who are living at a much lower standard of living, and who will be perfectly happy to trade amongst themselves if that produces economic returns. So I do think you're going to see some very interesting tensions around that question play out. I mean, I think in the US, what some leaders are starting to recognize is, it sounded like a really good idea to outsource all your low margin manufacturing to far reach corners of the world, except when it's masks, and the places in the world those masks are made have suddenly decided, thank you, no, we'll just keep those right here, thank you. And, now I think people are going to start to realize the price of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take the last 3 questions that are here in the chat, and then we'll close this talk. Terry Erwin, can you briefly share your question with Rita? Where are you, Terry?
I'm out here. Hello, Rita. Great to hear you live. So,
it's nice, isn't it? It's fun.
Yes,
so many new friends. It's cool.
Kind of fun, yeah, from all over the world. So quickly, as time is pushing, my company's working with companies right now globally and having discussions around instead of staying with the way that companies got to where they are today, shifting that to more of an achievement, return on investment mindset, where a vision is created, not for the books and for lending purposes, but an actual vision where there's actual buy-in from the employees, and changing the mindset to invest in the employee and employee buy-in to create a better product that has a higher rate of return for the customer, right down to the point of sale in retail or manufacturing or whatever it is. What in your conversations have you heard, seen lately that is reflecting variances in the larger corporations, those global 1000s? What have you been seeing?
In terms of how they deal with their people and the purpose?
Yes, and how they're going to change how they do business going forward. Because you so eloquently alluded to just a moment ago, local people don't necessarily buy the international stuff anymore. If something local is reasonable, maybe they'll go there. So the big companies got to change their mindset to attract that customer back, because we're in a place right now where local is really key.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I've seen. The first is, just as with everything in this crisis, the examples of company behavior range from the truly angelic, to the truly despicable. And, and you've just seen every flavor of variant that there is there. I do think the smarter companies are already thinking about, how do we move forward? So things like, I think the first few days was really just about logistics. How do I get everybody set up with the internet? How do I get everybody that I need to, with a computer that can do this kind of stuff? What do I do about the people on my front lines that can't sit behind a computer screen, that have to be protected? Those kinds of very logistical things. I think what's happening now is companies are doing a lot of probing and testing to see what the new models are likely to be. With respect to their reputations, I think we're going to look back and really make some judgments on who behaved well and who behaved badly as we go through this crisis. And just as an illustration, the airlines, which are now asking for a government bailout, are asking for just about the exact same amount that they gave out in stock buybacks over the last few years. So they just basically handed all this cash out to their shareholders, and now they're saying the government should replenish those coffers. Well, I'm seeing a lot of increasing resistance on the part of, first of all, many people are now starting to care. Like the average citizen, you said, I think stock buybacks should be, the rules around them should be changed. They'd look at you and like, what's a buyback? So nobody understood it. But now I think what's happening is the story is so simple. You gave all that money to your shareholders. Now you don't have any, and John Q. Citizen is now going to have to bail you out to keep you, keep a vital service going. So I think we really are seeing an attitudinal shift on the part of ordinary people about the ability of corporate resource allocators to do basically whatever they want. And I think we're starting to see a return to the recognition that many of these things are public goods. They serve a public interest, and they should be regulated as such. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying I think we're seeing just a lot of variation. I think the companies that are doing well are the ones that have taken the point of view of, if they can afford it, we're going to try to be a different company. Another one that I'm surprised by, to be honest, is Disney. My daughter has a good friend who works at Disney, and when Bob Iger came back after basically Florida shut down, the theme parks are shut down, nobody can go into a Disney property. And here's a company that went from basically printing money like a year ago, and Iger was going to go out on a high note. And now he's basically come back as a wartime leader. He said, we're going to have to shrink this company. And unfortunately, one of the things he did was he furloughed, lots and lots of people, including my daughter's friend. And she's 28, right? 29. So they're people in their 20s, and they're asking the question, look, we looked out for your interests when you were printing money, and now that things are bad, you're not looking out for our interests. And I think people will remember that. Mm. So, Disney's wonderful image is the happiest place on earth, blah-de-blah-de. I mean, is that even going to survive this moment? The fact that when are you going to feel comfortable going into a crowded movie theater again? When are you going to feel comfortable standing in ticket lines like this, right? So I think there's a reality. How dangerous is it for real? But there's also going to be this change of behavior. Now that I haven't gone to the physical movies in a year or a year and a half, maybe I decide I don't want to do that anymore. And so I think one of the things the forward-looking companies are really thinking about really hard is, it takes, it takes 30 to 60 days to form a new habit, and 30 to 60 days to unlearn an old habit. And we're starting to get into that critical window now. So what are those behaviors that are going to change that we need to be thinking about as we evolve our companies going forward?
Wow. Amazing, Rita. Just so many points that you touch upon, the 30, 60 days habits that we're getting into that. So what we're doing now, it might become a habit when mm-hmm. we're free again. And what leaders do, the decisions they take on their employees will impact them not just now, but forever, and the
Absolutely.
brand.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're developing a reputation as somebody who does not do the right thing. Now, look, if you don't have any money and you don't have any borrowing capacity, you know, there's just a limit on what you can do, but there's a way you can do it honorably, transparency, with respect, versus just sending out notes saying, guess what, you're fired. You know, I mean, it's just a very different, very human kind of thing. One other thing that I think is valuable to think about in the context of these habits and things, and this is almost heretical to say this, but I've talked to a lot of people who are saying, you know, there's parts about this I really like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm loving not having to get on airplanes. I'm liking the fact that, you know, that I can meet so many new people, and that people are so much more open to these conversations, and a lot of other things. I'm getting to know my kids better. I have friends that are the parents of teenagers, and they said, what a difference. You know, they're getting enough sleep. They're not as cranky. They're taking initiative to do fun things. Like one of my teammates has a daughter, and their high school trip to Washington, D.C. got canceled. And so her little group of friends did this whole fun thing on Instagram where they photoshopped themselves standing in front of all these Washington monuments, and had virtual like little parties where they would drink Coca-Cola and flash up the background of like the Washington Monument as though they were there. And I mean, just wonderfully creative things that people now have access to. So, I mean, back to this question of what are we going to keep? I mean, I think some of those things we've discovered we really like are maybe things we're not going to want to give up so much. Another point on that I think is valuable from a project point of view is, if you had asked us 4 months ago, would we be willing to make the investment that's required in actually true remote working? So learning the technology, getting the hardware, building up we all would have said, yeah, of course we need to do that, but we'll get to that. Like, it wasn't the top priority. Now we've all made that investment, right? Those kinds of investments need to have a return. So you're starting to hear things like there's a company in San Francisco, about a 400-person firm, that has been working from home now for a month. It's going great. And the CEO is basically saying, tell me again why I'm spending $10 million on San Francisco office space, right? So you're going to see people recognizing that things they never thought were possible are actually possible, and they can be managed.
Wow. Thank you, Rita. Two more quick questions. Bill Sepp from France. You know, Rita, he's part of the Marshall Goldsmith.
Absolutely.
Bill, go ahead. Bill,
I think he's on mute. You're on mute.
Where are you? I see you now. I have the power, I guess.
You have the power.
Okay, good.
There we are.
Excellent. Sorry for my clumsiness. It's so nice to have you with us, Rita. This is really, really a treat. Thank you. And to this group as well. It's really been nice to see us all come together. I'm also was working in the 70s, and I did 25 years of Lean Six Sigma, process improvement. And so my experience has been a lot of work trying to reduce cost, but every project that I worked on was always a project when we had a boom, more demand than supply, and the financial returns on those projects were always superly outrageous. I helped one company earn 30 million a year as a dishwasher just because they couldn't produce enough. So I'm looking at our current situation, and I've never imagined in the history of mankind a bigger recovery than what's in front of us. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you've told these great stories about the shutter maker and about Nortel and about the company in San Francisco. So I view leadership's openness and ability to react as really key. And if we don't manage to have the right leaders in place to harvest this demand, like there are companies that make hospital equipment, they just couldn't supply it fast enough, and the shutter maker was fast. So I'm viewing us coming on a time where great leadership to be agile and fast is going to take out some of the slack and the resiliency issues in our supply chains. And I'd be curious to hear your thinking around this, because I'm viewing this as the biggest, we're sitting in front of the biggest boom time for project professionals in the history of mankind.
I think that's probably true. I agree with that idea of, for this particular profession, I think your skills are going to be hugely in demand. Probably not the customers you've been serving. And this is a theme that's come up before. So, you know, you may be called into different sectors than you've worked with before. It may be different kinds of problems. So if I go back to the theory of competitive advantage, right, you've got in the beginning, you have this soup of ideas and technologies and stuff kind of floating around, and the entrepreneurial function, whether it's independent startups or whether it's within a company, pulls together some group of resources from that and sort of models them into something you could introduce to a market. Then you have the growth process, the sort of launch process, where you bring that thing and you scale it. And now all of a sudden you've got to bring in legal and, you know, quality control and decent project management and all that. Then if you're lucky, you have a period of exploitation where you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor and things are kind of ticking along in a predictable way. And then that advantage is going to come under pressure, whether it's through an inflection point or whether it's through natural evolution, and you have an erosion of advantage. So pretty typical picture of a competitive advantage life cycle. So here's the thing. You're going to need project people at every one of those phases. So in the launch phase, you've got to take this fuzzy, adorable, new little business and you've got to now grow it up, right? So you've got to have systems and processes and repeatability and, you know, security and I mean, all that stuff that startups don't think about, right? So that's got to happen. At the exploitation phase, you're in this red queen race with your competitors, where a competitor does something, you have to do something. A competitor does something, you have to do something. And then at the erosion phase, it's how do you gracefully repurpose resources and talent and other things. And each one of those is going to require a different kind of project management. So depending on where you've traditionally sold your services, you may find yourself speaking to different people with a different kind of problem. But I do think it's a hugely important skill set that you bring.
Thank you, Bill. And Rita and I, it's in my ball now, but we set to write an article around this. I think I love the views of Rita on the role that the project manager or project leader can play, which is a bit different than we're used to. So I think we need to mix her views with our views. But we'll get back to that. I still owe you something, Rita.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've got plenty to do. It's okay. So one of the other things that I think is important is I think what you're going to see soon, very soon, is a lot of big companies coming to the realization they have absolutely no idea what's going on. I mean, we did this little project at the end of last year for an ingredients supplier to the food business, and their new CEO, and his mandate to us, this is Ryan McManus, who I mentioned, my colleague, and he just said, I just want to know what's going on in my company with respect to digital transformation. And so we basically sent a very simple survey to anybody in the company who had digital something or other in their title, right? So that's how we found them. And the reason they complied was because the CEO basically said, if you don't fill this out, you're not getting another dime, or in their case, euros, for your business. So we got really good answers. We found $15 million that was being spent at that exact moment on something like 122 projects that nobody in headquarters knew anything about. So I think one of the very clear things that we're going to be needing is somebody to kind of do that, which is just go find out what we're working on right now, and then the triage, you know, and then it's going to be, well, why are we still doing this? You know, I think there's going to be a whole lot of decisions around just getting refocused on what our portfolio should look like.
I always say you can, in a normal business, you can kill 50% of the projects, nothing will happen. In crisis, you can kill 80%, nothing will happen.
I agree. The other thing that's going to happen for sure is all the junk is going to get written off now, because it'll just get lost in the shuffle. So it's, in a weird way, it's going to make things look even worse before it makes things look better. And that's kind of back to your point about the boom. You know, once we've written off all the nonsense, right, then the boom gets even better.
Yeah. Let me just go to the last question. Fleming from Denmark, just in a minute, if you can. I want to finish on time, and we're taking, quite a lot. Fleming, are you unmuted?
Yes,
okay.
I think I'm here. Thank you for all the good input, Rita. of course, it's like that organizations, they become sick like humans. They have a lot of subsystems in general, right? And one of the things that I'm occupied with is that when we go ahead and we start to create recovery strategies, we are familiar with a lot of strategies never happen, or we know the waste in there. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts about what I would call strategic governance?
Mm-hmm. So to me, the heart and soul of this is really allocating resources across a portfolio of initiatives. And I use a very simple portfolio map, which has uncertainty about markets on one dimension and uncertainty about technologies on another. And this is historical, because this has all changed in the last 3 weeks. Historically, you would put certain resources against your core business. You'd have certain resources against what you can think of as near field adjacencies, and then some resources at the outer sort of rim for options, which are small investments you're making to explore the future. And my hypothesis has always been, in the core business, you kind of let whatever your normal governance system is take care of itself. And in the newer businesses, that you need an actual growth board or a governing board to make sure that you don't just get all the resources sucked into your core. Well, here's what's going on now. The things we used to think of as low uncertainty, fairly predictable parts of all of our operations, that's all been tossed into the air. So in effect, we've seen a giant lurch in all of our portfolios toward the high uncertainty arc of this portfolio. So I think the answer I would use is I would borrow the governance process that we recommend for innovation leaders, which is, I'll briefly summarize it. You have a board which consists of people with real power. So they have resource allocation authority. They have a set of criteria that has been really worked through and discussed for what kinds of things we will deserve our resources. So is it on strategy? Does it honor our values? Is it on purpose? Whatever your criteria are, but agree on those in advance. That takes a lot of the politics out of it. Then that board meets regularly, reviews what's on the portfolio, and in the initial stages, you have a fund that is dedicated just to the innovation, for example. And the way that you mediate the tension between the existing business leaders and the innovation leaders is the growth board basically bears the risk of anything that's considered to be an uncertain decision, in the sense that the loss doesn't sort of get chalked up to an individual manager, it gets relegated to the growth board. And when innovation, in this case, actually comes to market, the benefit in numbers terms goes to the manager in terms, and so now they go from, oh, I don't want to do this risky thing because it might hurt my numbers, and it goes from bring it on. It's all upside to me. Now the twist I think that we're going to have to make is we need a similar process for dealing with the whole portfolio. It's not just the innovation portfolio anymore, it's the whole thing. So one of the critical things, and this may be another topic for you to think about, Antonio, is the design of incentives within companies. Because one of the things that will kill our organizations, if we realize our business has to change, we realize we need new strategies, we realize we need new thinking, and then we leave the same old incentive plan in place. And I think that is an area, I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it, but we need a whole new way of incenting behavior.
Wow. Let me just thank you, Rita. You're one of the few persons I could listen forever, because
Thank you.
It's so interesting, insightful. You never talk about yourself. You talk about people, businesses, ideas, strategy, challenges. So it's something I admire so much. And the other thing I admire from you, Rita, is there's many people who think about crazy ideas, many people working on today and the short term. You are one of the few who makes the connection between the long and crazy world with the reality. And this is a gift that I love on your way of thinking and communicating. So I want to thank you on behalf of this humble team, which we're trying to find a way ourselves to just provide a bit of help to the people that need it. I'm going to direct anybody in this group and in our networks to your newsletter. I think this recording should be watched many times by many people because you've given so many steps and insights on what can we do and how can we work together towards at least the right top quadrant if not the bottom right one, which I think that's where we want to end up. But thank you, Rita. Really, really, really appreciate
Thank you all.
your time, and well, we'll be in touch very soon. But I think on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, as always, Antonio, and keep up the good fight.
Thank you. And say hi to John again. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
I will. I can go find him. Okay, so
Take
long.
care. Bye, Rita. See you
Bye.
soon.